Joining me now is our panel, Reid Wilson, founder and editor of Pluribus News, Teresa Kumar, president and CEO of Voto Latino and an NBC News contributor, and Sarah Chamberlain, president and CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. Thanks to all of you for being here. Sarah, let me start with you and this idea that, yes, we are seeing this avalanche of criticism against the former president, but we have seen this before. I ticked through some of the examples, the Access Hollywood tape when he was a candidate, some of the criticism in the wake of his meeting with President Putin in Helsinki. Is this time different? Does it feel different? I mean, he's an announced candidate now, and his candidacy didn't seem to make a very huge splash when he made that announcement.
No, it didn't. As the newspaper said, Florida man announces. See story on page 26. I do think this one's a little bit different. You've got a lot more members coming out, making comments about him. And now let's not forget, we've lost 3 cycles in a row. The Republican Main Street Partnership, which is what I run, is the only reason we are in the majority. And we elected people that are in D seats. And they didn't run on Trump. They didn't even mention Donald Trump's name. So maybe it's time. We'll wait and see.
The last point that you make may be the most significant, which are the losses in 2022. Teresa, weigh in here. How are Democrats viewing this moment? Democrats know better than anyone that you cannot count out former President Trump. Do you think this weighs into the final decision by President Biden about whether he runs again, for example?
Well, I think, first of all, I don't think we're going to hear anything of whether he runs again, and probably until April. He still needs a Congress that's working for him. He wants to make sure that he gets most of his priorities through, and I think he has. I think the biggest challenge, though, for the Democrats is how do you look at a Republican Party that it took them almost a week to actually start condemning these remarks? And part of it makes it like where you actually trying to poll people and see where it fell. And I think when you look at McCarthy, I think one of his calculations is like he can't completely condemn him because you know who else was on stage with Nick Fuentes? Marjorie Taylor Greene, someone that he needs in order to secure the speakership. So sadly, I think that for the Democrats, they're sitting back and say, this is more of Trump, and we're waiting for more of the Republican Party to come out and condemn what is happening, because it is that kind of ethnic politics, so to speak, that is actually tearing the country apart.
I want to play a little bit more sound from Republican and then get your reaction on the other side, Reid.
Sees anything wrong in anything he does. So this is characteristic of his approach, which is either say it was a joke or say he didn't know what was happening. But that doesn't fly, obviously.
No, the meeting was bad. He shouldn't have done it. But again, you know, there's a double standard about this kind of stuff, and I don't think it'll matter in terms of his political future.
So, Reid, what do you make of that? I mean, here you have Senator Lindsey Graham saying it doesn't matter in terms of his political future. Is he right about that?
First of all, my takeaway is that Mitt Romney looks pretty good in a beard.
We all know that.
Exactly. But no, I think Lindsey Graham is right in that this is not going to be the final moment of Trump. I think the final moment's already come. Can you run a Rose Garden campaign if you don't have a Rose Garden to run from? He announced several weeks ago that he's running for president. We haven't seen events. We haven't seen high-profile outings. And now he's staying away from Georgia. It is clear, to Sarah's point, the Republicans who did better than they should have in Democratic districts stayed as far away from Trump as possible. It is clear to the candidates who are running that they can't be associated with a guy who's now lost 3 cycles in a row, never won the popular vote, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that this is a moment when Republicans are able to distance themselves from Trump, but the camel's back may already be broken.
Yeah, what's so interesting, though, is I remember back in 2016 when people said, you know, once the general started, why isn't he more front and center? When's he going to really get into this race in earnest? And then when he did, things started to turn around. Sarah, if you look at the polls, our polling shows 30% of Republicans support him still. If you have a crowded field, again, let's turn back the clock to 2016. That's what happened. That's how he pulled out a win for the nomination.
You're right. That's exactly how he got there. Hopefully this time there won't be 15 people on the stage. There'd be
There
2 or
could
3.
be. You have
There
a
could
lot
be.
of people who
It
are
could be.
signaling they're curious about
But I
this.
think they learned from what happened in 2016. Maybe they learned their lesson. But I would go back to that 30%. They like his policies. There's a lot of Republican Main Street Partnership members that like his policies. Talking about the man is a little different. So they are able to separate the two.
Yeah, go ahead,
By the way,
please.
that number you just showed, the 30%, that's been falling. NBC, to your credit, you guys have been doing a great job asking that question for, 5 years now.
Yeah.
And that number is, it was 55 Trump and 45 Republican Party, and now it's down to 30. It's just been creeping down ever since.
And I think to Sarah's point, though, is that they like his policies, but they may not, they're distancing themselves from the man. And so the only other person that really fills that vacuum is DeSantis.
Yeah,
and I think that is actually one of the reasons perhaps why Trump actually floated his name, saying that he's officially running because he wants to tear down DeSantis before he actually gets any wind on DeSantis.
I think the two of them will have a war.
Ron is sanctimonious. He already has
know.
a nickname for him, right? Well, look, the New York Times is reporting, and I think this is notable. This says a lot about this moment, that former President Trump, Reid, is going to stay on the sidelines. He's not going to Georgia in the closing days of this race. Herschel Walker is his hand-picked candidate. He didn't go during the first election. What does it say that he's going to sit on the sidelines?
It says that he is toxic in what is now a swing state, what is now somewhere around the 270th electoral vote. He can't show his face there in an off-year election because he's going to turn out as many Democrats as he is Republicans. So it is, this is, it's quite the statement that he's on the sideline in a race. Because let's not forget that 2 years ago, when the Democrats won the 2 Senate runoffs in Georgia, he did 2 events for those Republican senators. And there are no shortage of Republicans up here in Capitol Hill who blame Trump specifically for the 50-50 Senate that gave Democrats control right now.
Well, and one of the reasons being is that remember he was saying this is all a fraud. The whole election is rigged. And so we don't know how much of that actually impacted the right from actually going and voting for the other individual. And I think that's one of the reasons why they don't want him there.
And Sarah, I've spoken to so many Republicans on the ground in Georgia who have said exactly that they believe the former president depressed turnout with that messaging that Maria Teresa is talking about. Is Brian Kemp becoming the real kingmaker in Georgia?
Absolutely.
He's not on the ballot, though, so he doesn't kind of help drive turnout in that sense. But could he make a difference for Walker?
He will make the difference. I think if Walker wins, it's going to be because of Kemp and driving the Kemp people out to vote for him. I don't know how many will, because obviously Kemp won pretty handily, and we're in a runoff with a Senate race, so it's going to be interesting to see.
You make the point, Sarah, that voters still like former President Trump's policies. Maria Teresa, when you think about President Biden, the thing that hangs over his head, perhaps more than anything else, is the economy. And here he is dealing with this rail strike. He's trying to avert it. But how much is that a drag on President Biden as he makes this decision, as he molds this decision?
I think that what we saw in November, had it been that red wave that everybody claimed, it would be a very different decision. The fact that it was so close in so many races, despite the high inflation, it speaks to people that we have voters that trust them. And it's not the base of the party necessarily that trust them. It's the independent, moderate voters that trust him. And I think that actually gives him an opportunity to say, you know what, maybe we have a good thing going here.
Well, Biden has the opposite problem from Trump. So Trump, they like his policies. They don't like the man. They actually don't like Biden's policies, but they like the man. So it's an interesting dynamic to sit and watch this. Our polling showed that dramatically in November. Boy, they're not happy with the economy. They're not happy with us. But they like President Biden.
It's what makes them such fascinating competitors. Reid, we know that the president met with congressional leaders today at the White House. What is your expectation for this lame duck? Do you think anything significant is going to get passed?
Well, I think the vote to codify same-sex marriage is significant and a massive sea change from where we were just 10 or 15 years ago, when same-sex marriage was a third rail that nobody wanted to touch. Now you've got, a dozen Republicans who have voted in the Senate to codify it. So that alone, I think, is substantial. We'll see what they do. I think the debt ceiling is probably the most significant thing that they can do to avert chaos in the next year, because if the debt ceiling remains, it becomes the obvious hostage for House Republicans to force whatever change they want. And House Republicans have shown in the past that the debt ceiling is on the table for leverage.
Absolutely. So I think that's going to be a major flashpoint. Great conversation. Thank you all so much, Reid, Maria, and Sarah. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.